Hello, listeners. Kathy Lawless, Life Story Curator, bringing you this podcast series, How Did I Get Here? A series of interviews designed for people just starting out in their careers or in transition or possibly feeling stuck, and giving them access to the stories of people who have been there, done that, so that they might be inspired with some new ideas or maybe just comforted knowing they are not alone. That everybody starts somewhere and everybody goes through times of transition and times of feeling stuck. Today, I'm very excited to be interviewing David Harriman. Hello, David.
Hello, Kathy.
And David and I met through a master network group, gosh, almost 3 years ago.
At
And
least.
at least, yeah. And David is a independent home and auto insurance broker, and he happens to be my independent home and auto insurance broker as well. So, and he's got a fascinating story. Well, I'm calling it fascinating because I found it super interesting. So, welcome, David. Let's
Hello.
let's get started with the icebreaker questions because we want to find out where you grew up, how many siblings you have, and where you are in the birth order, and how that maybe influenced you as a young person turning into an adult.
Got it. So don't I'm glad this is a video call, so you can't throw anything at me when you find out that I was born in California. So yeah, I grew up in California and kind of mostly LA County. But my parents were divorced, so for junior high, I moved up to Northern California with my mom for a bit, and I am the youngest of three. So I have two older sisters, and then I also my dad when my dad remarried, the lady he married had three kids of her own, so we ended up I was the youngest of the six of us, and I had two older sisters, or I have two older sisters. I have two older stepbrothers and an older stepsister. So we were often referred to as the Bradley Bunch because there were a total of three boys and three girls, even though it wasn't like the dad had the three boys. But yeah, so that was kind of the deal. And yeah, I lived in Northern California for a bit. And then at the end of eighth grade, I realized that a lot of my friends were getting involved in just drugs and things like that. And I called my dad and just asked if I could move down to live with him, even though he and I we didn't have a very good relationship. And so it took some convincing, but I basically just, begged him to let me move down there with him just because even though I had a very loving mom, uh, she wasn't strict. She was very interested in being the cool parent, and I didn't need the cool parent. I was doing terrible in school. I had basically failed seventh grade, but my principal liked me and he let me move on to eighth grade. And then I basically failed eighth grade, and it was a new principal who liked me and was going to let me go on to ninth grade. And I was pretty sure I was going to fail ninth grade, and it was not going to end well. And um, yeah, my mom she wasn't a great student, and she didn't really care that I wasn't a great student, and I needed somebody that would kind of force me to do those things. So as much as my mom and I got along great, I just I knew I needed to have a change of scenery. So after a couple months of the summer after eighth grade, I was able to talk my dad into letting me move down to Southern California to live with him and my stepmom. And once we once I moved in with them, I had to go to a private school because they didn't want me going to a public school in LA. And yeah, so I started going to school, and
Yeah.
so by ninth grade I was a B minus average student, and then you know ninth, 10th, 11th, 12th grade, each grade got progressively better, and Yeah, so I ended up doing okay in high school after basically bombing my way through junior high.
Right. Wow. But it's a pretty mature move on your part to recognize you were not on a successful path. I mean, and you took the hard way out.
Yeah, I've I've always like I'm finally now to an age where I'm friends with people that are my own age, but no, just I don't know what it was. Ever since I was pretty young, like even when I'd go to friends' houses, I always I always went to my friends' houses to hang out with my friends' parents, and I always just seemed to get along better with uh older people. So I don't know if it was I don't know that it was necessarily that I was so smart when I was in eighth grade. It was more that I was around my friends' parents who knew what was going on in my life, and so I think that they had kind of helped me see um, see things through their lens. So yeah, I don't think I can take full credit for going uh, for making for coming to those decisions on my own. Like uh, people that weren't my parents, like sort of helped me make that decision. So, yeah, I don't know.
Wow. But that's still a pretty big decision. So what were you playing sports or did you have any positive habits other than having
No,
at the time?
so no, junior high definitely no sports. I had I was more interested in the color of my hair and the number of piercings I could have. So
Oh,
I had two eyebrow rings, a whole bunch of earrings, a mohawk that was blue. Actually, it was a double mohawk, and yeah, that was junior high. I was just so interested in making sure that anybody who was around me thought I was weird. That was like my priority. And then once I moved to Southern California to live with my dad, um, that wasn't the priority anymore. So like that kind of went away, and I don't know. I started playing music, just guitar and bass and a little bit of piano, and but no sports. My school that I went to was very small. There were 11 students in my graduating class, so we didn't have any sports teams or anything like that. So yeah, just I and also I worked most of high school. So after school, I would typically be going to work for a couple hours after school before going home.
so that would keep you out of trouble, so to speak. And
Yeah, and my dad, he's an attorney and he's an econ major, and he his deal with me was basically if he heard me say this, he might disagree, but the way it felt in high school anyways was he was paying for school, he was giving me room and board, and that was pretty much it. Most of the clothes that I bought, I had to buy myself, and then anytime we went out to eat, usually even if I went out to eat with my dad, if we weren't eating at home, I was paying for my meal. So it was I had to work if I wanted to do anything outside of the house ever. So yeah, the working part wasn't to stay out of trouble. It was definitely
very much,
just to make money.
wow, okay. And so what kind of jobs did you have then at that?
So the in ninth grade, I started working for a company called Thermoview, which was I did door to door sales, selling doors and windows. Though I never even booked a single appointment. I did it for about, maybe 4 or 5 months. And I was the only person there without a criminal record. Everybody else that worked there, they were all ex-cons, or yeah, ex-convicts. And they were mostly in their early 20s, all gang affiliated. I was not at all any of those things, but it's just the job I ended up getting. And so, yeah, that's why I was saying I don't think I was doing that job because my dad worried about keeping me out of trouble, because I was finishing school, and then I was going and driving around in a van full of ex gang members, and then selling doors and windows. So he didn't know that part about them being, you know, uh, gangsters or anything like that. So it was entertaining.
Mm, okay.
And
Well,
so that was ninth grade. So that was the ninth grade, and then the summer after ninth grade. And then a girl that I went to school with, she worked for a school uniform company. So, and that was just a retail job, and she was able to get me a job there. So then I started working for a school uniform place, and I worked there, I want to say, a, a couple days a week after school. So I'd take the bus there starting basically in 10th grade, and I worked at that school uniform place for pretty much all of high school. And then on the weekends I would work there on Saturdays and Sundays.
mm, wow. So started
And
young in the
I
workforce.
was just going to say, you can edit this out if it's not appropriate, but working at a school uniform store in the San Fernando Valley, which happens to be the adult film star capital of the world,
Uh-oh.
a lot of the people who came in were not buying school uniforms to go to school in. So, yes, there were a
Oh,
lot of actresses coming in to buy their school uniforms.
interesting.
Yes.
Only in California, right?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, we're going to shift gears here just a little bit. On a fun meter scale of 1 to 5, 1 being couch potato, 5 being the life of the party, where do you put yourself?
Um, I like to talk. So if it's a party that's not very loud, I I like to be I like to think of myself as a 4, and that's only if everything's being done by the books. I'm definitely a 1 on the fun meter if people are wanting to break the rules. I pretty much will always sit any of that stuff out, and I always, for the most part, I always have. So
Ah,
yeah, it can be a total party pooper, unless people are, you know, following the rules. Then I'm all game for it.
okay, so that might lead into the next question then on the risk meter. Where are you on a scale of 1 to 5? 1 being
I'm an
low, 5
insurance
being
agent. I am as risk averse as they come. So a 1, a 2. I mean, I've bought a ticket to go see a movie, and then I think one time I went and snuck into a second movie, and that I was so worried about getting called out by somebody that worked at the movie theater that I was like, I can't ever do this again. And that was with my mom. I was with my mom. She's the one that did it. And I just remember the whole time I was just like, the thought of how humiliated I would be if I were caught sneaking into that second movie, um, it just wasn't worth it. I would have been so much happier had I just paid to go see that second movie.
you could enjoy it then. You didn't enjoy it at all.
Exactly.
Okay, well, so that's interesting. So maybe it's no wonder that you're an insurance agent then. But so tell us a little bit about what it's like to be an independent home and auto insurance broker, and then we'll get into And how did I get here? We have a little glimpse, but I know there's more.
Right. It's it's good. I'm the only insurance agent who I know that is in this field by choice. I mean, everybody else I know who's in insurance either kind of fell into it, um, by getting hired into a different like entry level position and then eventually just ending up being an insurance agent, um, or their second generation or third generation insurance agent where it's just been handed down through the family. That's just a really common way people end up becoming insurance agents. Um, Sorry, what was the exact question though?
Just what is it like being an insurance
Oh,
agent?
right. So it's now pretty fun to be an insurance agent. The first several years, it wasn't all that fun because I was so worried about being perceived as professional, especially because I was really young when I started, that it made it hard for me to be myself. And I'm a kind of goofy guy, and I I felt like I couldn't actually act the way that I was, the way that I wanted to, just because it would come across as unprofessional, which would then cost me clients. And when I was first getting started, I needed so many clients that I couldn't afford to lose any. And now, over the past few years, I've just decided that, I'm going to be who I am. And if some clients don't like that, that's okay. Like if our personalities aren't a fit. And it's been really good because most of the clients I have, like, I really like talking to them. So a lot of insurance agents think of their job as being really boring, but I don't. I like when my phone rings, since I most of the clients I have are people that I really like dealing with. It's it's almost like I just get to talk to friends all day, which is great. And that's not the position a lot of insurance agents are in because they just, they try to be a one size fits all and they take in oh, let's my phone made noise again. There we go. That's not the position a lot of insurance agents are in because so many of them just try to be everything to everybody. And so they end up with a lot of clients that they don't like dealing with, which makes it difficult for them to enjoy their jobs. And I think that's the case for just a lot of people in different fields too, is that they are just willing to work with anyone and everyone. And then it makes it hard to appreciate their clients. So yeah, now I really enjoy my job. It's fun. I get to laugh with my clients. I like making goofy videos for work, and I don't know, it's fun. I like it.
Well, I think that's why I was drawn to you when we met at the networking group was how you were an insurance agent with a personality. You could explain it in a way that um, the stuff I needed to know that it wasn't the stuff I didn't need to know. So anyway, so I appreciate that you are who you are because
Thank you.
that's what again you. So and by the way, those of you listening will not be able to see David, but he does not have the blue mohawk, double mohawk anymore.
That's
He
true.
looks very much like an at this
Yes.
point. So, David, let's talk about how did I get here? How did when you were younger? We already heard a little bit about up to ninth and 10th grade. How did you decide you wanted to get into insurance?
Um, so I actually didn't want to be an insurance agent. I wanted to be a contractor. I like to build things. Even now, that's what I spend most of my free time doing is building cabinets and furniture and building a playhouse for my kids right now. I love building things. And I wanted to be a general contractor. And that's from the time I was fairly young. So even though my dad was an attorney, he never did well financially, at least not when I was going to school. Everybody thinks because I went to a private school that means that my parents were rich. They weren't. Even before I had that other job, I part of my tuition was paid by me. Sorry, back up. The school that I went to high school at, I also had gone to that same school from first grade to sixth grade. So,
Oh,
um,
okay.
so I'd gone there from first grade to sixth grade. I moved away for 2 years when I was living with my mom, and then I came back for ninth through 12th grade. And first through sixth grade, after school, I would work at the school, cleaning and things like that to help pay a portion of our tuition, just because my dad was an attorney, but it was just a salaried position and he didn't do terribly well financially. So I grew up with him where life was comfortable-ish financially, but then I also lived with my mom who just lived paycheck to paycheck, and we would have the power cut, we'd have the water cut, uh, we would, you know, we pretty much lived off of fast food, which now as an adult I look back and go, how did we pay for that, but we couldn't pay for the electric bill or whatever. And we never filled a gas tank ever, as far as I can remember. It was always like $10 in the gas tank, it's just, or $5 or whatever. And so I had lived that life since I was really young, and it was just so, again, I'm very risk averse, and I don't like having just unknowns floating out there. And even when I was young, it really just weighed on me that, like, I never knew I never knew if things were going to be able to get paid for. It was so weird. So when I was young, I wanted to make sure I didn't end up in that position. And my friend's stepdad was a mentor to me, and he was a general contractor. He was the most successful person that I knew, and so I grew up at my friend's house. I spent a lot of time there, and I just remembered there was so much peace that came with being with their family, even though they weren't perfect and they fought and they argued and all of that, but they at least had the financial side of it taken care of. Um, and that was just so foreign to me, because even this really small private school I went to, it wasn't a bunch of rich kids. It was, I was, it was a school tied to a church, and pretty much everyone in that church, regardless of what their income was, they sent their kids to this really small private school. So most of my friends' parents that I went to school with didn't make money really. So I'd grown up, with the exception of this one friend and his stepdad, who they were not related to my school at all. Everyone else I grew up with came from families that were always really struggling financially. And so when I spent time with this other family and the stepdad, they were very successful financially. He was a general contractor, and I decided this is the life that I want. Like, I want this, when I have kids. And so I spent a lot of time with them. I started working a little bit. I never worked for him full time, but I would do odd jobs for him, cleaning up job sites and things like that. And my plan was to go to school, graduate high school, go to school, get a degree in accounting, because I did want a degree. So I was thinking, all right, I'll get a degree in accounting, and then go into carpentry or construction or something like that and learn that business. So that was my plan. And while I was going to school um, for accounting, I kind of then told this plan to my friend's stepdad. His name was Richard. And I said, hey, Rich, like, I wanted, I'm getting this degree in accounting. I want to come work for you and learn the business. Um, and, I want to be you when I grow up. And it was like, great. You always come to me for advice. but you've never asked me if I think that you should be a general contractor, if you should actually do what I do. I was like, okay, well, do you? And he said, no, I wouldn't even be this again if I could start over. He's like, if I could start over, I would be an insurance agent or in credit card processing. I was like, what? He's like, it's recurring revenue. Once you get a client, it's not like selling a house where you get just a big commission. With insurance, you don't make a lot off any one client, but as long as you do a good job with your clients, you keep them for years and years and years. And so over the course of a decade, a client is, worth a lot because you're making that commission year after year. On the same client. And so he basically just pointed out that in construction, he's always having to worry about where that next job comes from. Whereas his friends who were insurance agents or had credit card processing businesses didn't have those same worries that he did. And he'd always wished that he'd gone that route instead. So he told me that, and I then went and started taking classes to get my insurance license. And then I became an insurance agent while I was going to school. And I worked for a corporate insurance company in a call center. And I knew I did not want to work the corporate side of insurance at all. So eventually I started building my own book of business, which is probably going to be somewhere else in this list of questions. But I started building my own book of business, which was pretty terrifying because I had to forego any sort of salary or anything like that. And I I'll save that part for a little later on because I
Okay.
know that you asked something on that.
I do have a question about you said you like to build, you had this vision, you thought, that feels like when he tells you that, that would be almost like a dream buster and could be a real hit to your plan on life. And so how did you I mean, what was it like to hear that?
He did a pretty good job of basically saying, painting a realistic picture that like as a once once you're doing something you love as your job, you're not doing it you're not doing it for yourself anymore. You're doing it for other people. And so you're really dependent on the client that you are working with, right? So even if you're building a beautiful house for a client, if your client is a complete psycho, you're now stuck dealing with this psycho for the next year. And it doesn't matter how beautiful the house is, you'll never be able to enjoy it because so much of it is dependent on this client. And he pointed out that, like, sure, when I was talking to him, I wasn't married, I didn't have kids, so I had all the time in the world to spend working and going and looking at roof leaks that might spring up on a Saturday, or in the middle of what should be a vacation. But he pointed out that once I had kids in the future, I wouldn't have all of this free time. And he's basically a slave to his business. And he has clients, even ones that are fantastic, who anytime anything goes wrong with their house, they're calling him and he's having to respond whether he's on vacation or whatever. He's always on call 100% of the time. And what he always said to me, which I don't care about sports, so this wasn't the best. I don't know if an analogy is not the right word, but he would always say to me, someday you're going to have kids, and if you can go to all of their soccer games, that's going to be worth a lot more for you than necessarily loving everything you do at your job. And I don't even like soccer, so I don't know why that worked on me, because the thought of going to a soccer game sounds miserable.
Yeah.
But he basically just assured me that once I had kids, my priorities would change, and having flexibility would far outweigh uh, enjoying my day-to-day activities within work, which was really hard for me to wrap my head around. But again, he's just always been a very practical, logical person, and I knew plenty of people who'd followed their hearts um, to do what they'd always dreamt of doing, who weren't happy doing those jobs either. So I I just decided to, you know, trust his advice and go with it, and it worked out.
Wow. Well, I really appreciate you sharing that because one of the things I try not to do in my podcast is have people give advice because it seems like most people don't listen to advice, right? I mean, especially as a young person, most of the time it seems like you almost do opposite of what people are recommending or saying. I've had several interviews where people are like, yeah, my parents wanted me to go into X, but I wasn't going to do that. So I went into Y. Guess what? Now I'm into X. And, and they're admitting it later, but, there was this resistance to, yeah, listening to someone else. They really wanted to follow their own, either their own dream or their own idea about what they wanted to do. But you really took this to heart. I mean,
Yeah, it, I wouldn't I wouldn't have. It was because it was coming from somebody who, I wanted I I wanted to be I wanted to learn from him. I wanted to be like him. And as much as I loved both of my parents, neither of them were at a spot in their lives where I was like, oh, I want to be like that someday. So yeah, had my parents been giving me any career advice, I don't think I would have listened to any of it, because I didn't want I didn't want either of their lives. So it just wasn't, you know. So even though my dad's always been very supportive of me, he's never been somebody to just give advice. If I ask for advice, he will provide his viewpoint, but he's never been somebody to try to force his views onto me, which I appreciate.
so, but I think the big difference here is you were very much looking for, well, what's next for me. So you were curious, but you were also open to ideas. But you had a high degree of respect and admiration for this person. So that was coming from him. It then carried a lot of weight.
It did. And well, the next part will come up somewhere. Will come up a little later on, so I'll save this next part. But yes, I had a lot of admiration for him, and yeah, I still do. I still talk to him a few times a year, and yeah, he's still a general contractor building things, and he's doing fine. But yeah,
So he didn't take years and go into insurance at a later point.
no, no.
So did you like insurance then? You were, when you were in college, you kind of shifted your degree, or I guess you started taking courses, you said, to get your license. And then you went to corporate, new corporate wasn't for you. And then you started your own. Is that kind of how it went?
Yeah, so I actually I was working in a corporate environment in a call center, and I did not like it at all. And there was a pretty low ceiling. I mean, there wasn't much I was going to be able to do on the corporate side that was at all what I was interested in. I learned really early on that the bureaucracy associated with like the corporate environment was not something that I could see myself in, nor was it what my end goal had been anyways. My goal was to have an insurance agency. And it's just it's sort of a logistical nightmare to try to create an insurance agency when you have very little experience. And so I worked the corporate job for 3 years, split between two different jobs, but very similar types of work. Um, and then, by then I was 22 or 23. So obviously I felt like I knew everything. So I
Oh,
quit. Yeah. So I quit the corporate job and I decided I was going to go off and start my own thing. So I did that, except I was making no money. So I was working at Starbucks at night. So I would do insurance during the day, and then I would work at Starbucks at night. My dad always said that I worked at Starbucks to support my insurance habit, and he he was right. I mean, the first year, including my Starbucks income, I made about negative $10,000. So I had my Starbucks income, and then virtually no income coming in off the business, but I had all these expenses related to the business, and I racked up a ton of debt, which is not that is not like me. I hate debt. I've been really responsible with any credit card spending and all that. So then when I went off on my own and I basically was like living off of credit cards, oh man, that was just like a really tough year psychologically. And I don't recommend it. And then for year two, I continued to work at Starbucks, but I was getting some more clients and things like that, and it made it a lot nicer to at least not be going into the hole. I think year two, I was really excited when I did my taxes and realized that I made $10,000 that year. So about a $20,000 swing, though, right? So it went from negative 10,000 to positive 10,000. I felt great. Um, and as far as did I enjoy what I was doing, um, I didn't enjoy the insurance part, but I enjoyed the building of it, if that makes sense. So it wouldn't have mattered if I was focused on building an insurance business or if I was focused on building a general contracting business or a carpet cleaning business. It didn't really matter. The part that I enjoyed at the beginning was figuring out the puzzle. That's what was fun. And so it didn't matter what the business was. I enjoyed creating a business, even though at the same time that I was enjoying creating this business, I was also so anxious and stressed out about um, just the unknown. I had no clue if it was going to work. I kept feeling like I was on the verge of failure constantly. It, I would go months with very few new clients, and I just kept looking back, going, man, like no matter no matter how bad I think I'm going to do, like when I do my projections, trying to plan for the future, I would use numbers, and then I would go back a few months later and look at those numbers and be like, I thought I was being so conservative in my numbers when I would make these projections, and I just did so much worse than I thought that I could have, that it was pretty disheartening. So I had a lot of times, especially in those first 2 years, where as much as I enjoyed it, I also was kind of miserable because I just felt like there was no way this was possibly going to work out. Um, and I don't know why I kept doing it. I had so many times where I was ready to throw in the towel and I didn't, which is very unlike me because everything else that I'd done leading up till then, whether it was playing instruments or taking lessons or whatever, I never really stuck to much of anything in high school or junior high. But for some reason, I just stuck with the insurance thing, even though it was very, very hard.
yeah. Well, is there another route when you think about it at 23, I mean, would it be have been better to join another agency and kind of work your way up that
Yes.
way and then, or
Yeah. So I definitely did it about the hardest way possible. Yeah, in hindsight, I would have been much smarter to just go work with an established agency where I had room to grow into a position of ownership or something like that within the agency. So I really could have learned from people who've done it before, and that wasn't exactly the way that it went. I was still uh, I didn't create my own agency. I was creating my own book of business. So I was working with an established agent, um, but it wasn't. It was more like I was hanging my shingle there. So I was working fairly independently of that office, and the person who I was working with there wasn't. They didn't really care whether I failed or succeeded. So it wasn't somebody who I could go to, for a pep talk or whatever. And in hindsight, I think that it would have taken me a lot less time to do well in the insurance business if I would have found somebody that was really willing to mentor me, um, to become a good agent, and that wasn't the case. So it was a lot of just trial and error.
wow. Wow, well, I admire your persistence. So what was the tipping point that made you keep going? I mean, you said after year two, you had the big swing that you made a profit that
Oh
first year.
yeah, well,
It
so I was
didn't become easier.
so
Go back.
yeah so I I was still ready to quit then, because by then my wife and I had, well, okay, so when I was 24 I got married, and we were wanting to buy a house, and I still just had not very good income. And she was a nurse, so we were relying more on her. And I went and I actually applied for a corporate job, where I would make a lot more than I'd been making. And I got offered the job, even though it was just one of those things where I was like, I know I don't want this. I know this isn't what I'm supposed to do. And I called I called Richard, my mentor, and I was like, I'm still not I'm still not making any money. Like, it's just it's too hard. I don't know if I can do this. And he was like, don't take the corporate job. Like, that it's not going to last. Don't do it. Don't do it. And so I still thought about doing it. But then I got a referral for a client who, I didn't know him. I'd never done any business insurance or anything. And it was a guy who was in a bind. He couldn't find anyone who would do his work comp insurance. And I'd never done a work comp policy in my entire life. I knew nothing about it. Um, but I was hungry, and so I said, all right, like, let me see what I can do. So I put tons of work into finding a carrier who would insure this guy's or do this guy's work comp insurance. And I ended up writing the policy, and I had no clue what the commission on it or anything was, but it ended up being a $500,000 work comp policy. And the commission on it was it was close to $30,000 in commission, which I'd never even thought that such a thing could be possible. But the timing on it was, I was basically in a position where I was trying to decide whether I wanted this corporate job or not, and then this guy kind of got dropped in my lap out of nowhere, and I was like, holy cow, like, this is crazy. I was able to make $30,000 on one client. This was nuts. And he was the most difficult client I ever had. I didn't want to keep him as a client very long, because it wasn't worth it for the stress. but it bought me enough time to stay in the insurance business longer. And it's that one deal kind of got me over the hump, because that was definitely where I was the closest to just throwing in the towel, and just kind of out of nowhere I got this just infusion of commission that far outweighed what my 100 other clients all combined had made me. So yeah, that got me over the hump, and I stuck with it. So just good luck there.
So it was the universe sending you a message, stick with it. At the same
I
time, the universe was sending you the message of be careful who you work with. Sometimes
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
sometimes you don't want to work with just anybody. And there was a reason maybe he was uninsurable or difficult, right?
Right, right. Yeah.
Well, we're getting kind of close to having to wrap up here. What were there some other steps that you took that got you where you are today? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I would say, so one of the things that kept coming up just throughout my first several years in business was I was so bored. Like once everything started working the way it was supposed to, but I was still not just being myself. I I was just bored. Insurance was boring. It was a drag. And
Right? You're not building.
right, yeah, the building phase was over.
Now
Yeah, the honeymoon period was done. And so work was boring. I was bored all the time. And so I would call Richard, mentor guy, and because I had periods, even though financially everything was going fine, my boredom was just gnawing on me.
Mhm.
And so I would be like, you know what? I have this business. I can sell it for a pretty decent chunk of change. I could go and do whatever I want. And I kept getting really close to doing that. But before I would do it, I would always call Richard and I'd be like, I'm so bored. I'm ready to just cash out and go do something else. And he would say to me, it's like, you don't have kids yet. Like, you don't understand. The reason I told you to do insure, or the reason I encourage you to get into insurance is because of how good that industry will be once you have kids. He's he's like, it's not glamorous or anything like that, but it's going to be really good once you have kids, because you'll have a really flexible schedule, and just trust me, don't throw in the towel. So I swear every 6 months I was having to call him just for him to tell me the same thing. And it worked, because every time after I'd call him, I'd be like, okay, that's right, that's why you're in this. And so it was this constant struggle. And then it was so funny, because once we had our first kid, which was 5, well, yeah, he'll be 5 on June 12th. So yeah, once we had our first kid, like it was like a switch got flipped. I did not ever I never cared again about having a boring day or whatever. Like, the purpose to me of work had completely changed from like feeling like work needed to be my purpose in life. That went out the window. And I know high school graduates hearing this would be like, oh no, you gave in to the man, right? But the reality is, like, it was pretty freeing. I was like, it's like, oh, like, I can find purpose in all the rest of my life. Like, work doesn't have to define me. Like, I don't have to be known as the insurance agent. Like, I'm a dad, I'm a husband, I'm a woodworker, I'm a hiker and a backpacker and all of these things. Um, but once I had a kid, I was like, oh, I definitely can't give up the insurance gig, even if it is boring me, because it's this job that's given me the flexibility to do all of the things that I do define myself as, which aren't just the insurance agent side. And once that happened, by that, I mean, once having a kid kind of changed my outlook on things and I didn't realize, which I should have, that when I was having to call my mentor every 6 months to be told to stay in insurance, that my mentality, subconsciously, I kind of always had a foot out the door with insurance. Even though I wasn't leaving it, I always, in the back of my mind, was wanting to leave insurance because it was boring. Once I had a kid and realized, like, oh, okay, that advice that Richard gave me 15 years ago, well, at the time, 10 years ago, um, now I get it. Like, it made me then finally just fully buy in, and I didn't have a foot out the door anymore. And that's finally when, like, it clicked, and I was like, oh, it's so weird now that I'm not trying to be defined by my work. I'm suddenly able to enjoy my job far more than I ever did, and I really like what I do now. Whereas the first 10 years I didn't love it, and now I really do. Which I don't know what the trick is to make that happen. I don't want to tell everybody that if they just go have a kid, they'll suddenly like their job, because everybody's different. But for me, that's what triggered it. And yeah, it was unexpected, but yeah, it worked.
Well, what's occurring for me is this. You talked about you were bored, and I use the term when people feel stuck. But I wonder sometimes if people don't even know if they're stuck, that they're bored, or they're feeling scratchy, or they're just feeling unfulfilled. So that's kind of where you were. But you're right. Sometimes there is then that. Well, I have a foot out the door. Chasing something there. There's got to be something else, something maybe more interesting. Um,
And
interesting.
yeah, there were. I mean, again, I really like building things, so I just always had this recurring desire to leave insurance and then go into carpentry. Like, that's what I always wanted to do. And one of the things that kind of, during those 10 years of boredom, that helped me stay in it, um, helped me stay in insurance, even though I wanted to go do carpentry, was, again, at the advice of Richard, said, well, if you want to do carpentry, then go get a saw and do carpentry in your free time. You don't need that to be your job. And so basically, carpentry and just furniture building, was something I did in my free time, just a hobby, right? And that's what was able to help me stay in insurance, even though I was bored, um, over the course of those 10 years, which I look back and I just can't believe I actually did 10 years of being bored with it. But yeah, I don't know. I'm very glad that I stuck with it. And big surprise, Richard was right. Now that I have children, like, I couldn't think of a better career to be in. It's just such a good industry to be in for somebody that wants a flexible schedule with, decent income and things like that. So it's been good.
Well, I love your story because it is one of, it's not a glamorous industry, and maybe doesn't seem like a glamorous job, but it really has created all of the things in your life and your lifestyle that is you, right? I mean, you talked about you didn't want to have financial instability, and now you have financial stability, and you get to do all those great things with your kids, and all the hobbies that you enjoy. So anyway, so that's a great story. So we do need to wrap up. Is there anything else you would kind of share here at the end?
Hmm. I would just say that, you know, if it's if I were to do everything over again, I probably wish that I would have spent a couple years early on not taking life as seriously as I did. And I don't know. I feel like I had so much pressure from myself to like rush out and, you know, build this thing that I could have done it a little later on in life. And I don't know. Sometimes I just wonder if I was too serious as a young person. And I'm still young, and now I'm not serious. But when I was 20, I was like so, I don't know. I was way too serious, and I kind of wish that I hadn't have wasted my early 20s being super serious. I don't know.
Hmm, interesting. Well, you did mention that as a young person, you gravitated toward, older people anyway, or, the generation above you. So I don't know, maybe you were just anxious to be that. Now you're that.
I guess. Yeah, yeah, pretty much. I definitely feel the most comfortable in my skin now than I ever have. So that's good.
That's really good. Well, and it comes across, I got to tell you, I've met you, I think, in your comfort skin mode.
Right.
I
Yes, you have.
super serious mode, trying too hard. And again, I've really enjoyed our business relationship as well as knowing you personally. And I feel like
Yeah.
it's a friend too that I'm talking to about my insurance, not my insurance agent. So,
Right.
well, I do think we need to wrap up. So I guess on that note, we taking ourselves seriously doesn't really do much good on any front. No. Anyway, so thank you, David, for sharing your story. I think it's a
Thank
wonderful
you.
of getting started, of trying to, finding your way and figuring things out, but also, being persistent and diligence, and not necessarily going the glamour route, but going the route that works for you. And sometimes that's a hard route to take. So,
Yeah.
listeners, if you enjoyed today's podcast, please subscribe below. If you have any questions for me or for David, you can put them on my website, which is lifestorycurator.com, which is also where the other podcasts are posted. And you can also subscribe there, and then you'll be alerted of other podcasts as they come out each week on Tuesdays. So again, David, thank you. And listeners,
Thank you.
have a great day.
All right. Talk to you later.